One of the greatest quotes by the great Taoist sage Zhuangzi is a great lesson and understanding in how one experiences and abides in the true oneness of reality. Now we have to remember that Taoism is a path of oneness, a non-dual path, similar to Vedanta, similar to Zen Buddhism. And so this quote is an insight into the experience of what it is like to abide in that oneness of reality. And it's probably a quote that a lot of you have heard of, but haven't thought deeply about. Now, Zhuangzi states, "When there is no more separation between this and that, it is called the still point of the Tao. At the still point in the center of the circle, one can see the infinite in all things." This is such a beautiful quote and one of my favorite quotes out of all world literature. And for those interested in the Zhuangzi, I highly recommend getting the complete works of Zhuangzi, translated by Burton Watson, one of my favorite translations. And it's one of the greatest books you'll ever read, actually. But this quote in particular is a great insight into the nature of the oneness of reality and how we can abide in it. Now, in the quote, Zhuangzi states that when there is no more separation between this and that, one resides in the still point of the Tao. Now, when we study this quote, we have to understand a few things. And there is a word called Ching, which means species-specific essence. And this comes from Maoist logical theory. It's not technically Taoist, but it belongs to Maoism, which is another school of philosophy that arose during the Warring States period of China. And Maoism is arguably probably the second biggest school during that period of time to Confucianism. Taoism was always for people a little bit spiritually inclined and who were connected more to nature as opposed to Confucianism and Maoism. But in Maoist logical theory, you see this word Ching, and it means species-specific essence, and it relates to exactly what Zhuangzi is talking about here. Now, Zhuangzi's argument is that a human being's species-specific essence, our Ching, is a flaw. And to explain that, if we look at the species-specific essence of a horse, that would be to gallop gracefully. It's a beautiful thing. We see the horse beautifully, gracefully gallop, and it is really awe-inspiring. But for humans, Zhuangzi said that our Qing, our species-specific essence, is our ability to discern between this and that. Hence, when there is no more separation between this and that. And so what this means is our ability to measure life according to our intellect, our ability to be analytical about life. Now, Strong's is saying that it is totally a negative and bad thing. No, he's not saying that, but he's saying that because we are a slave to our projections, a slave to our view of the world, according to how we've been conditioned, that's how it's a flaw. Now, we have to understand why we cut the world up into this and that. And Taoist knowledge relates to Vedic knowledge, where in India and in Hinduism, you have the knowledge of Maya. Now, a lot of people think Maya means illusion, and it does mean illusion to a degree, but Maya really means measurement, the measurement of reality. And what that means is we cut the world up into this and that according to our conditioning, and then we superimpose that onto a reality that is actually pure and free of our projections. But because we project onto it, that's how we come into conflict with the world. And that's how all of the world becomes in conflict. So this knowledge you're listening to today is the medicine to cure all of that conflict. But are people in the world ready for that knowledge? And this knowledge has been around for thousands and thousands of years, but most people aren't ready for the knowledge. And even if they hear it, they undermine it, they demean it, and they just throw it off and just say, that's only for those who are spiritually inclined and those who are going into those deeper levels. It doesn't have any practical use, which is really ridiculous when you think about it, because if you apply it to yourself, if we all applied it to ourselves, we would not be in conflict. And so looking at the knowledge of Maya, where we measure the reality up into this and that, we cut the world up into pieces to suit our conditioning, to suit our temperament, to suit the way that we want to live, not the way that things are, not the way of nature, but more so to suit ourselves. Now, in Hinduism and in Vedanta specifically, there is the knowledge of neti neti. Now, neti neti is a practice. Now, neti neti translated into English means not this, or not this, not that. Now, what that means when you apply that to your own self is not this, not that in your mind. Trying to dissolve your projections of the world. Now, a lot of people will say that neti neti refers to not this, like not the mind, not the body. It does to a certain degree, but to deepen your spiritual practice, it applies to your projections of the world. Not this, not this. So when these thoughts arise of how you think life should be, that's when you apply not this, not that. This is what viveka is in Sanskrit. Discernment, the ability to discern between this and that within your mind. And what that does is it opens reality up. If you continue to practice that, it opens reality up and you continually see reality as it truly is, as opposed to how you think it should be. Now, practicing neti neti and getting out of your own projections can be easier said than done. Even people on the spiritual path who engage in deep spiritual work will begin to associate a certain image to themselves, and your ego kind of slips under the door, as opposed to just being open and free in this life and allowing life to be as it will without you imposing your own sort of agenda on it. You may have a spiritual agenda then, so you impose that spiritual agenda on it. So it's very, very subtle, see? The ability to allow life to be as it will and to kind of flow with the changes of the world without holding on to a certain self that doesn't want to change is very, very difficult in some sense. And abiding in the pure awareness, the undifferentiated state of consciousness, the Atman, only is possible when you get out of these projection of this and that. And that's why Zhuangzi says one resides in the still point of the Tao, where we can see the infinite in all things. See, when we're in the world of this and that, we're in the game of black and white, as Alan Watts said in his great book, The Book. And so you're in this game of black and white, of I don't like this, I like this, ugly, beautiful, high, low, etc. And as we know with Taoism, it's a destruction of incorrect opposites. And we're coming back into harmony of mutual interdependence. The holistic view of the world, as opposed to the linear view of the world, which cuts the world up into this and that, according to how and what suits us best as an individual. And so when we apply neti neti and we begin to stop our discernment of this and that according to our conditioning, then we can see the true oneness of reality. And Zhuangzi is actually saying the oneness is inherently always there right in front of our face, waiting for us to merge with it. But we are so caught up and entangled in our Ching, in our species-specific essence of dissecting the world up into this and that according to our conditioning and socialization, and basically our intellect. And so we don't merge with that one reality that we are all a part of. It's like an analogy that they use in the Ashtavakra Gita of the jar, where you have the space within the jar, right? And you are under the impression that that space in the jar is separate from the space outside of the jar. But once you throw the jar onto the ground and it smashes, the space merges with the outer space. And that's basically a representation and a metaphor for how we are, where in our mind, we contain all of this knowledge which holds us into this cage of an identity which keeps us separate from the true one reality. We forget that the nature of the mind is empty, spontaneous, and free, and we fill it up all full of garbage, and then we become attracted to that knowledge, which is kind of a prison which holds us inside that prison, and we can't experience the greater totality, which you are always a part of, but you are yourself locked yourself inside the cage of your identity and basically swallowed the key, and you don't want to come out. But once you apply neti neti, once you understand this quote from Zhuangzi, then you see that there really is no this and that. That's a subjective viewpoint according to everyone's own personal conditioning. So do you really want to understand the nature of the Tao, or are you just interested in listening to these quotes with no deeper understanding? They give you a sense of feeling good, but it doesn't take you to its nth degree. We really need to understand this deep knowledge if we really want to allow the spiritual wisdom of the East to come through us and to bring peace to the world, piece by piece. And that's what we're all doing here. We're not looking at changing the global dynamic of the world. We're looking at just our own immediate life, which helps those also around us. This is not an agenda. This is not a movement. As Zhuangzi always points to, this is an individual endeavor, really, because you are working on your own subjectivity. Of course, if a lot of us understood the concept of Ching and how it is a flaw, this ability to cut the world up into this and that, a lot of things will change. But you also have to remember, people actually have to understand what is being said. And as we know from thousands and thousands of years of the great Eastern traditions, still a lot of people don't really understand what is being said, even though you can explain it to them as clear as day. But all of us here are on my channel to try and understand this deep knowledge so that we can finally embody these teachings. And as I said, then and only then can we bring peace to the world piece by piece by lifting the veil of this illusion of this and that, so we can understand that we've always been one with the Tao, one with the ultimate one reality of consciousness itself. Shanti, shanti, shanti.